Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today we're going to briefly run through the reworked Demon Hunter. We finally got kind of the talents and it was implemented into the PTR server, so we're going to take a look at that today. I'm not going to walk through every change that happened in terms of the actual article. I will link this below if you'd like to read through it, but we're going to do something a little more interactive and walk through the talent tree in-game, talk about some of the changes, and then talk about my general thoughts as well as some bugs that are currently happening. I don't know if this is going to be the final iteration of the class. If it is, I don't really have too many complaints about it, you know, outside of the bugs, but we'll see. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down below though, if you end up watching the full video, and tell me how wrong I am. All right, let's go. So really quick, here we are on the PTR server. And let's quickly walk through the tree and the major changes that have happened. So if you are a Demon Hunter Savant, you will notice probably right off the bat some pretty massive changes, especially in terms of the spec tree. Now on the right hand side, or sorry, the class tree. In terms of the spec tree though, if you look at the right hand side, it's kind of hard to notice any major changes. A lot of it happened in some of the different talents were shifted around slightly. Most of the pathing's the same, but what really benefits the Demon Hunter in this case is the fact that a lot of the 2-point nodes were shifted to 1-point nodes. Let's start with the class tree on the left-hand side. First things first, they made Sigil of Flame baseline, so now it's going to start with Sigil of Misery at the top, and then you're also going to notice some pathing coming out of here from Vengeful Bonds back into kind of the center of the tree, and same with this improved Sigil of Misery. So you're kind of seeing this out and in that you see with a lot of other talents, allowing players to play around talents that they might not prefer, and to really min-max their build without disrupting the flow of their talent tree. Now for the Demon Hunter, specifically at the top of the tree, it looks fairly similar out of a few of these transition points, but let's walk through what you might see. We're going to start with Sigil. We'll probably take Blazing Path and Imprison still, just to get down to some of these talents. Now, of course, if you're in a Mythic Plus or if you're in a raid environment and you don't need Imprison, you can always play around it now by coming down through the sides if you'd like. But in terms of Mythic Plus, we'll probably play something very standard, which has us taking Imprison, Improved Disrupt, Consume Magic, Charred Warblades, and Pursuit. This will allow us to have pretty much pathing everywhere. The big thing that you'll notice though is that this is no longer a choice node between Fellblade and Aura of Pain. They split these into two, and then Rush of Chaos that used to be here was moved all the way down, and they got rid of the Hunt capstone. We're going to talk about that when we get down there. In terms of pathing, we need to pretty much pick up one of these three talents. Right now, Fellblade is bugged. As you can see, it doesn't actually, despite taking it, doesn't reduce the points I need to spend. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to kind of show that off. But for now, we can technically take it and it doesn't matter, but you'll probably play either Swallowed Anger or Disrupting Fury. Now, in cases where you don't need or don't want to play Aura of Pain either, you can ignore it and you can play into things like Improved Sigil of Misery, or you can play into Vengeful Retreat and Unrestrained Fury if you'd like to have, you know, access to more Fury in your kit. In the case of this, we are now good to go though into the second portion of the tree. The changes here, not too many. Most of the pathing is the same. You see a little bit of changes on the right hand side. Aldraki Designed was moved up from down. I don't remember if it was here or up one, but it was shifted up a little bit. They added a new talent called Live by the Glaive. So when you parry an attack or your attack is parried, you restore some health and you gain fury. This can only occur every 5 seconds. I'm gonna have to do some testing in Mythic Plus to see how powerful this is. There might be situations where you use it, some might not. It might not generate enough. You might not frequently be parried, but Demon Hunters are known for parrying. That's kind of their main form of mitigation through things like Demon Spikes and Crit. But starting off, we will take Aura of Pain here. We'll also want to take Precise Sigils or Concentrated Sigils since it has synergy with the tier set because it's an increased duration. I prefer Precise Sigils, but you can take whichever here. We're going to also want to probably take Aldraki Design, and then we're going to go into Will of the Illidari. This is now a 1-point node, which is super nice, and same with Illidari Knowledge over here. In order to play Chaos Nova into Illidari, we need to grab some of these talents. So let's just grab, we're going to grab Fellfire Haste for now, Soul Rending, Chaos Nova into Illidari Knowledge, and of course, we're going to grab something like Demonic. Now we have 2 more points that we can spend here. We can put it into an Improved Nova. We can put it into Infernal Armor for kind of more physical mitigation. This is really good in Mythic Plus, especially dungeons designed like Freehold that have a lot of physical attacks. Not sure how impactful this is going to be in the next season because there seems to be a little bit more caster based mechanics, but we can just play 2 points in Infernal Armor. For now, I'm going to ignore Live by the Glaive. You can always, trade Will of the Illidari for that because you're going to be gaining the pathing into the middle of the tree by going through darkness. Soul Sigils just isn't impactful, mostly because it's limited by the amount of fragments you can generate. So let's stick with Will of the Illidari for now. Bottom of the tree is opened up with 11 points remaining. So let's go quicken sigils, which this was changed. It was technically nerfed. It now only activates sigils faster. It doesn't now reduce the cooldown of sigils. So your uptime on ability, like things like Elysian Decree, Sigil of Misery, Silence, like none of all these cooldowns are going to be back to like their normal state, which is like a minute or minute and a half or 2. We do have Flames of Fury, which increases Sigil of Flame damage, and it generates additional fury per target hit. So if we take 2 of those points, that opens up Elysian Decree. Now you're going to see that it says max 2 charges. That's because there is a talent in the Spec tree that increases the amount of sigils you actually have. It's a new capstone point called Illuminated Sigils. We're going to get to that in a bit. For the rest of the tree, we'll probably want to play through Internal Struggle, Erratic Fellheart, and then finally, this is the updated capstone that now has Fodder to the Flame and Collective Anguish. I think Collective Anguish will typically be the play, but if you like to be a little bit more kind of focused on your rotation and what's going on in combat, Fodder of the Flame is now changed to activate off of Spectral Sight, and it's not just a random proc anymore. So you have more on-demand burst damage with it, but I think Collective Anguish is a little bit better for the Vengeance Demon Hunter because you gain an I-Beam with it compared to Havoc Demon Hunter, which gains Feldev. You'll play Darkness into Double Rush of Chaos to end the tree. Now, the hunt is still available. You can either drop Collective Anguish for it or Elysian Decree to pick up the hunt, and then there's arguments that you can shift maybe some of these points elsewhere. But I think in general, this is what the tree is going to look like. Overall, we have more points to spend, better pathing, and overall, I just think this feels a lot better to play around. There are options where you can drop Infernal Armor for like Live by the Glaive and Chaos Fragments. You can pretty easily substitute that. There's a little bit better pathing through here, going into Soul Rending or out to the side, even at the start of the tree, playing out into improved Sigil of Misery. So if I wanted this, instead of, let's just say there's a dungeon that doesn't have a consume in it, that I'm going to need to actually do, or for example, I'm playing Blood Elf, I can drop this for improved sigil and still have the pathing available. So the kit isn't as restricted as it used to be. So all around, pretty great changes. Now, of course, there were a few nerfs, for example, quicken sigils, but I think we're going to get used to how these changes are affecting the class with the Spec tree in mind. So with that out of the way, jumping over to the Spec tree, let's talk about these changes. Like I said, for the most part, it's going to be extremely similar, at least throughout most of the first and second section of the tree. The biggest change happens in like the second and third. So let's just quickly grab the talents that we're used to taking on live servers and go from there. Now, the big changes happened right here across the board was in your row 5, was Agonizing Flames is now a 1 point, Extended Spikes is now a 1 point, Burning Blood is now a 1 point. So we have a lot more points to spend in this category. It was very difficult to pick up because there are some great talents in here. You have things like Void Reaver, Soul Furnace, Painbringer. These are all powerful talents. Obviously, with no more lunchboxing, or at least that's what it used to be called, with the Fiery Brand 4-set bonus, we're probably going to ignore some of these Fiery Brand talents unless you really like playing with it. But there are some cool new talents that they added on the right side and some movement that are different talent moves that we've seen. So first we have Ascending Flame. This is a new talent. Sigil of Flame's initial damage is increased by 50. I think this is going to run into the same issue that Sigil of Chains used to run into in this top section, is that you have to spend a lot of points to get here. And you kind of have to play down into Fracture to get the Spirit Bomb. So it's difficult to justify spending the points to get to this without dropping Sigil of Silence and Deflecting Spikes, which leaves the center of the tree pretty desolate because you have to play then into these talents. And then you won't be able to get Extended Spikes, you won't be able to get Sigil of Silence, and you won't be able to get Deflecting Spikes unless you sacrifice points later on, if that makes sense. So I feel like this center of the tree is still a little restricted, which I'm not a huge fan of. I wish maybe these had arrows going into Sigil so you can maybe skip around deflecting, or there was some kind of like lateral movement somehow. I'm not sure how you would do that. I'm not sure if you would maybe move Sigil, this choice node somewhere else, maybe further down the tree, maybe further up the tree. It's really hard to say, but I feel like these are really impactful talents right in the center that you have to take. So it makes pretty much anything on the right side of the tree very difficult to justify getting to. It almost feels like Meteoric Strikes should be over here instead of in Prison or something like that, because you're gaining the additional charge here. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we're probably going to ignore that for now. I don't think we'll want to take Ascending Flame, or it's going to be very difficult to justify getting there. But who knows? Maybe the damage will make up for the lack of not having Spirit Bomb, but I can't see that happening without testing, which I'll get to probably later this week when Mythic Plus testing opens up. Anyways, rant over. Let's talk about some of these other changes, or maybe what the pathing might look like. So keeping in mind our new tier set and how VDH typically performs in keys in terms of its damage profile, we're definitely going to want to grab Spirit Bomb here. Fallout is typically a must. Fragment generation has a big impact on how the tier set interacts, as well as the class interacts as a whole. So we want to make sure that we're grabbing Fallout, and then we're going to want to make sure that we grab Dark Glare Boon. Now this isn't always a take. It refunds some of the fury that you get, and if you are happening to play into Fellblade, you might not need that additional fury because you can Fellblade every 12 seconds, it scales down with haste, and it has a chance to proc off of your Fracture. So there's arguments to be made that you don't need to play Dark Glare Boon, which might be really good. I know that Ruinous Bulwark isn't necessarily the greatest thing because it feeds into kind of overhealing, maybe in lower keys, but not so much in higher keys. And then Volatile Flameblood is, again, more fury generation that we arguably might not need. So my idea is that we're probably going to play through Revel in Pain. Not that Revel in Pain is going to be good without a tier set bonus that is based around Fiery Brand, but it does give us access to Chains of Anger, which increases the duration of your sigils and the radius of them, which means that it's going to have synergy with the tier set, and it's going to lead us down into this last section of the tree that we really want to get to. Other things like Painbringer are really strong for Mythic Plus because it reduces damage you take from enemies. Things like Void Reaver, also very strong, and so is Soul Furnace for kind of that big burst damage. So we might play down here into Soul Furnace, maybe into Painbringer twice, and then that leaves us with an additional point to spend. So here is why I would argue for Dark Glare Boon, because you have to spend the point somewhere. Fiery Brand increased single target damage, maybe in Raid. If you want some extra fury generated from your Immolation aura, that's a fine choice as well, but let's just play Dark Glare Boon for the argument. Now, in order to get down to Last Resort and feed the demon, we have to play through Stoke the Flames, which again is kind of my big issue with this. I would like to see more lateral downwards transitions from maybe Burning Alive or from Soulmonger into Feed the Demon instead of only having Stoke the Flames, because Stoke the Flames, it's a fine damage increase on Feldev, but Feldev is such a small part of our overall damage where it's mostly now going to be Sigil damage and Soul Bomb damage or Spirit Bomb damage, that Stoke the Flames just feels kind of just like you have to play through it to get to the talents that are important. And that's what feels bad, is the forced choice. But we'll take it. We'll also grab double Feed the Demon with Last Resort. Last Resort, you don't have to take in high keys, but in high keys for having that cheat death, very, very powerful. Now, this is kind of an off rant or off the path that we're talking about, but there is a cheat death trinket in the next patch that's going to scale up to, 480 or whatever the item level is going to be. If you have that cheat death trinket, you might not need to play Last Resort, but for the most part, Last Resort is always a safe choice for the Demon Hunter. We also see Cycle of Binding. Cycle of Binding is going to give you cooldown reduction. Now that we no longer have Quicken Sigils, Cycle of Binding is going to reduce your sigil cooldowns whenever your enemies that you're attacking are affected by your sigil. So, like, using Sigil of Flame will then reduce Sigil of Flame. And what's cool about this is we're eventually going to get down through Charred Flesh into something called Illuminated Sigils. This gives you a second charge. So you'll use your Sigil of Flame, and then your next Sigil of Flame will reduce your other charge of Sigil of Flame by the 3 seconds, which is super, super nice. So it'll kind of feed into itself a little bit, increasing the uptime on Sigil and increasing the uptime on your tier set. This is also sharing with Down in Flames, which is a talent that we're seeing played a lot in Season 2, but probably going to ignore this a little bit more. So we're going to play Illuminated Sigils. Now, I will say this, unfortunately, I can't show this off or anything like that because this is a bugged talent currently. It's just not giving additional charges. You can still see down here, like my Sigil of Silence still has only 1 charge to it, so it is just bugged. So with that being said, we now have access to Sigil of Chains. This is where Elysian Decree used to be, or Fodder. One of the two were down here. But we can now grab Sigil of Chains, which is super, super convenient. It gives the Demon Hunter utility. It gives them a slow. It's a really powerful cooldown that I'm so glad isn't stuck up in this corner up here. So I think a lot of Demon Hunters will be really happy to see this. So we can spend a point here for Mythic Plus. Now again, if you're in Raid, you probably wouldn't take this. You would probably take something like Soul Carver. And then lastly, we do have 1 point left. Most likely, we'll probably try to take Soul Carver, or you can take Focus Cleave if you want a little bit more single targets, a little more focus damage, but there have been builds that don't play into any of this. And so Soul Carver, and Soul Carver was buffed. So instead of giving you 2 fragments immediately on the first hit, it gives you 3 and generates 3. This is buffed. So you're actually going to be able to play 4 of your capstones down here. Now you could get rid of Last Resort to be able to play into Focus Cleave, into like a stack of vulnerability if you want to, or Soulmonger. but more than likely this is what I think will probably end up playing going into this next patch. Again, this is purely theory crafting. This is like a first glance. I really haven't tested much in terms of like how it's going to interact in an actual dungeon setting. This is strictly just like looking at the tree and looking at, you know, what's been changed. Anyways, I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. VDH is the last tank that I haven't covered tier set wise in terms of like on my YouTube channel, because I've been waiting for this rework. So this weekend I'm going to be doing a ton of testing. Let me know what you guys think in terms of the talents and what we might play, because I definitely want to test them out this weekend and then report back on it, because I'm really excited for these changes. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do this. So again, thank you guys so much. Anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.